So I'm about to show you how to make the simplest terrarium that you can. These are just things that I have gathered up from around my house. This mason jar was just sitting on a shelf. It hasn't really been doing much, so I figured, well, it kind of is like a perfect terrarium. So my nerve plant was needing something that would hold humidity a little bit more, even though it was sitting in a very humid window and it was sitting on a pebble tray. It was struggling. It was getting those crispy leaf tips and it just was not able to kind of be in its happy environment. So whenever you are making any sort of terrarium, which usually involves something that does not have a hole in the bottom for water drainage, it's a good idea just to make sure that you do have a good solid layer of either rocks or even sand on the bottom before you start to add in your soil. I've got, I think, probably about 1.5 inches or so of rocks in the bottom. And then the soil that I'm using here it's actually nothing special. It's just straight up potting mix. I didn't even add anything to it like I normally do. Regular potting mix all by itself usually holds moisture a little bit more, whereas a lot of potted plants like more well-draining soil. So I have not added anything to help out with that because this is a plant that does like to have a little bit more moisture in the soil and I don't want to have to worry about watering it quite so much. So just straight up potting soil, nothing fancy. And I'm only really looking to put enough soil in the pot that I'm not like having to fill it up halfway. I'm really just trying to cover the root ball, that's it. So just putting like the absolute bare minimum soil in there. Also partially because, as you could see, the root ball on this guy is still pretty tiny. He doesn't have a big root structure and I want to not overwhelm it with soil, which is something that can happen if it's not ready for the amount of soil that you're putting it in and then the moisture that will be sort of sitting in the soil. You could potentially end up with root rot. So I'm just going for the absolute minimum here because this jar is maybe just like a teeny little bit on the bigger side, but I'm not too worried about it. This guy has not been happy where he's been at, so I think hopefully it would only be up from here once he has more. So once you've got them all tucked in and you've got kind of enough soil just to cover the root ball, I haven't really packed it down very much because I want the roots of the existing plant to be able to really spread out. And then I just added a little bit of moss for some decoration. I think I had this from a previous terrarium that I made. And moss is also really handy for holding moisture as well. So this will just kind of increase the overall humidity inside the terrarium. Plus, it looks fun, so why not? Just making sure that you're not completely burying the plant. This guy is still pretty teeny tiny and it's kind of easy to drown him. So I can't wait till he does get bigger and kind of fill it up more. And when you're building a terrarium, you get to stick whatever you want inside it, which is kind of fun. So I've got a few extra rocks kicking around and I just kind of look for odds and ends that are sort of decorative that I could stick inside. I sort of like things that are from nature, but you could go with whatever you want. And I think I even have a extra pine cone, so I'm gonna stick that in there. And yeah, keeping it pretty simple. It's a pretty tiny little plant, so if I put any more in there, he might get lost. And once everything is sort of tucked in and settled how you would like it, the soil I did pre-moisten, but I'm just kind of using my little squirt bottle here to wash the dirt off the inside of the glass, get the moss a little bit damp, and then just make sure that the actual root ball itself has a little bit of moisture in it. And that is it. And you can decide whether you want to put the lid on it or not to really increase the humidity. I am leaving the lid off for now just to kind of give him a little bit more time to acclimate to his new environment and just see it might be enough without the lid to keep the humidity how it needs to be.